The email came through at 3:14 p.m. Sharp subject line. Quick chat in my office before you head out. The kind of message that never means quick and never means chat. I stared at it for a long second, watching the cursor blink like it knew something I didn't. Outside my cubicle window, Phoenix sunlight glared off the company logo, etched on the glass. Apex Dynamics, 40 years of tech solutions and 40 years of pretending loyalty meant something. I closed the email and stood up. My knees cracked when I did, a sound that somehow felt appropriate. My name's Harold Dunn, 57 years old. Senior systems engineer at Apex. I've been here longer than most of the furniture. Started in '94, when we still used beige towers and floppy disks. I'd written half the scripts that still kept the servers breathing. Every outage, every crisis. I'd been the one who brought the system back from the dead while the managers paced and prayed. 30 years of that. No stock options. No health coverage after retirement. Just a plaque from 10 years ago that said, "For dedication beyond expectation." When I stepped into Mark Latham's office, the air was colder than usual. Mark was in his 30s, MBA, fresh from Stanford, sharp suit, sharp smile, sharp enough to cut you and call it feedback. His desk was empty except for a sleek silver laptop and a single paper folder turned deliberately toward me. I'd seen that setup before termination folder. Standard HR issue. "Hey, Harry," he said, voice light. Nobody but him called me that. "Thanks for coming in." I stayed standing. "What's up?" He gestured to the chair across from him. "Go ahead. Take a seat." I didn't. Something about the way he said it, too casual, too rehearsed, made me want to keep the high ground. He folded his hands, fingers steepled like he'd practiced empathy in a mirror. "You've been with Apex a long time, and first off, I just want to say how much we appreciate everything you've done. You've really kept the old systems alive longer than anyone thought possible." Old systems. The phrase stuck. He went on. "But we're moving to a full cloud infrastructure. Different language, different architecture. The board wants fresh energy leading that change." I waited for it. The punchline. The insult wrapped in corporate silk. Then he smiled that bright, empty smile and said, "Your Windows 95 inches a cloud world." It landed like a punch straight to the ribs, quiet, clean, irreversible. I looked at him, at the way he seemed proud of his cleverness, like he'd just dropped a TED Talk quote. "Cute line," I said. He chuckled, relieved I wasn't angry. "We'd love your help during the transition. Show the new guy around, make sure he understands your setups. You'll still be compensated for a few weeks, of course." He slid the folder across the desk. Consulting agreement. Inside, a non-disclosure, a non-compete, a line about voluntary transition support. I scanned it without expression. Years of debugging had taught me to read fast, think slow. "So this is it," I said. He leaned back. "It's not the end, Harry. It's a new chapter for both of us." There it was again, that MBA optimism. I nodded once, folded the paper, and put it back in the folder. On my way out, I passed Evan, the so-called new chapter, 25, messy hair, hoodie that probably cost more than my monthly gas bill. He looked up from his phone just long enough to give me a half smile. "Hey, you're Harold, right? You'll be showing me the ropes?" "Something like that," I said. At my desk, I packed slowly. A framed photo of my wife, a coffee mug that said Hashone Problem Solver, a USB drive I'd never used for work but always kept close. The office hummed with the same artificial air I'd breathed for decades, recycled and dry. Nobody said goodbye. Nobody noticed. Driving home, the desert stretched wide and empty on both sides of the freeway. My hands stayed steady on the wheel, but my mind wasn't on the road. It was on passwords, protocols, the hidden dependencies nobody else knew about, little ghosts of code buried deep in the network that only I could find. When I walked through the front door, my wife looked up from the kitchen table. How'd it go? Just a shift in direction, I said. She nodded, not convinced, but she didn't push. After 30 years, you learn when not to ask. Later that night, I sat in the dark office at home, staring at my monitor. The inbox pinged a new message from Evan. Subject: quick question. How do I access the main production server? I felt something in my chest loosen. Not anger. Something colder. Cleaner. I typed back one sentence. Let's go over it together tomorrow. Then I leaned back and smiled for the first time all day. Some systems remember who built them. The first week of transition felt like déjà vu with worse lighting. Evan hovered over my desk, chewing gum and calling me man every third sentence. His laptop covered in stickers that said things like, hack the future and move fast or die trying. I showed him the system architecture I'd built piece by piece over 3 decades. The kind of structure that looks simple only because someone spent years removing the chaos. He nodded like he understood, typing fast, missing half of what mattered. When he broke something, and he always did, I fixed it before anyone noticed. Not to save him, not even to save the company. I did it because disorder offended me. Mark strutted around the office, calling it a digital transformation. He said the words like they were holy. Every time he presented my old documentation with a shiny new logo, people clapped. Legacy optimization, he called it. I recognized my diagrams, my comments, even the color codes. I didn't correct him. I just watched the room fill with people who thought innovation meant renaming the past. By the 3rd day, HR asked me to return my ID badge early. Just procedural, they said, all smiles. I handed it over without blinking, knowing full well it would complicate every access protocol. Evan would learn that soon enough. He wasn't malicious, just careless. He called me Harv once in a client meeting, mid-presentation. The clients laughed politely. I didn't. It's Harold, I corrected. Steady voice, no smile. Later that afternoon, Mark forwarded one of my memos back to me with a note. Can you proofread this before I send it out? It was the same document I'd written 3 years ago. My name was still in the footer. I went home that night and sat in my kitchen with a mug of black coffee gone cold, watching the cursor blink on an empty text file. The hum of the refrigerator sounded like the server room back at Apex, low and constant. The longer I sat there, the clearer it became. No one else understood how fragile it all was. Every system depended on a dozen invisible threads that only I had tied together. They thought the network ran on cloud services and modern software. It ran on memory. Mine. I opened the disaster recovery plan I'd written 10 years ago. 87 pages of contingencies, protocols, backups, fail-safes. Every scenario accounted for. Every possible crash predicted and neutralized. It was a masterpiece of redundancy. I scrolled through it slowly, realizing not a single person on that team could explain half of it. If something went wrong now, truly wrong, there wasn't a soul in that office who could stop the bleeding. So I started building my own copy at home. A mirror drive. Line by line, I pulled down data logs, configurations, scripts. Nothing illegal, nothing destructive, just information. Insurance. I'd learned in 30 years that companies don't remember the people who built them until something breaks. Then, they remember your name. But too late. During the day, I played along. I nodded when Evan bragged about migrating the old frameworks. I clapped when Mark used words like cloud-first paradigm. I even smiled when HR sent out a company-wide email welcoming Evan as our new lead architect. They copied me on it accidentally. I left it unread. Evan kept asking for advice, and I gave it, patiently, clinically. But I also watched how he documented nothing, how he deleted logs to clean up storage, how he skipped daily backups because they took too long. Each shortcut, each oversight, I noted like coordinates on a map. The company had always been one bad decision away from collapse. Now, it was sprinting toward it. At night, I coded. The mirror drive grew like a shadow. I labeled it Apex Archive V01, a harmless name. I wasn't planning revenge. Not yet. What I was doing was more fundamental. I was creating truth, a record of what existed before incompetence rewrote it. My wife asked once why I was staying up so late. Just work, I said. She nodded, same way she always had when deployments ran long or crises hit the network at 3 a.m. She knew better than to ask when my tone got that quiet. The next morning, I walked into the office to find Evan celebrating a successful migration. The dashboard behind him showed errors, stacking up like falling dominoes. He didn't even notice. Mark stood nearby, proud as a man unveiling a monument. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. I fixed the issue before lunch, quietly, efficiently. Nobody thanked me. They didn't even realize what I'd done. But I noticed the way the system trembled under their hands now, like a machine starting to sense its own instability. Revenge, like backup, only works if you plan it before the crash. It happened on a Thursday morning, the kind of morning that starts ordinary and ends up defining everything that follows. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when the first alert came through the internal channel. A data transmission failure on one of our secured client servers. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up with a string of messages from Evan. Hey man, quick question. What's the rollback procedure for external pushes? That's not a question you ask unless you've already done something you shouldn't. I opened the dashboard and saw it immediately. A full client data packet sent to the wrong partner company. Confidential information. Non-disclosure breach. A career-ending mistake. By the time I reached the office, the damage was spreading faster than anyone could contain it. Mark was pacing in the glass conference room, tie loosened, face red. Evan sat pale and silent, staring at his laptop screen like he could will it to undo the send. When I stepped inside, every head turned toward me like the condemned looking at their executioner. Harold, Mark said, voice tight. We've got a situation. I see that. He folded his arms. This data push went out under your supervision. I blinked once, slow. Under my supervision? You were training him. The responsibility falls to you until the transition is complete. The words came out rehearsed, like he'd been practicing them in the mirror all morning. I looked at Evan. He wouldn't meet my eyes. You told him to handle client deliveries independently last week, I said. I have the email. Mark waved a hand. That's not the point. The client's threatening to pull the contract. We need accountability here. Accountability. That was the word they always used before they pushed someone off a cliff. He continued. Effective immediately. Your system privileges are suspended. IT will reassign your credentials. Work from home until we finish the transition. HR will reach out. It wasn't just humiliation. It was erasure. A quiet deletion of 30 years of reliability, framed as protocol. I didn't argue, didn't shout. I'd learned a long time ago that silence cuts deeper than noise. I went back to my desk and began packing. The motions felt mechanical, keyboard unplugged, coffee mug wrapped in paper, photo frame turned face down. It reminded me of soldiers folding a flag. Deliberate. Dignified. Final. No one spoke. Even the hum of conversation had died out. They watched from their cubicles like people at a funeral who didn't want to be seen grieving. As I headed toward the door, something caught my eye. The conference room, empty now, still had Evan's laptop open, screen unlocked, cursor blinking in an unguarded terminal window. It was nothing at first, a forgotten workstation in the chaos. But I stopped, set my box down on the table. From my pocket, I took out a small flash drive. Old one, scratched, labeled in fading ink. Tools. I'd carried it for years, a habit born from a time when backups were survival. I slid it into the port. 5 seconds. A single script executed clean, silent. invisible. Then I removed it, closed the lid, and picked up my box. Nothing happened, not yet. That night, I sat in my garage surrounded by ghosts of machines, old routers stacked like bricks, floppy disks in cracked plastic sleeves, printed manuals yellowed with age. The air smelled faintly of dust and solder. It was my museum of obsolescence, a reminder of everything I'd built before the world decided newer meant better. I ran my fingers across the surface of an old circuit board and thought about how progress devours its creators. Loyalty was just a placeholder until the next upgrade. For a moment, bitterness burned hot and sharp. Then it cooled, settled into something colder, steadier. I realized I didn't need to destroy Apex Dynamics. I didn't even have to touch it. The system was already rotting from within, patched over by arrogance, propped up by ignorance. All I had to do was let it run the way they wanted. It would collapse on its own. My script would simply record the truth when it did. I turned off the light, stood in the doorway, and looked back at the silent rows of forgotten machines. They called me obsolete. Obsolete systems don't die. They wait. The first alert hit my phone before sunrise, a sync failure in the cloud storage cluster. 10 minutes later came another, authentication errors cascading across every client account. I watched the notifications pile up in silence, each one a flare in the dark. By the time the sun burned through the blinds of my home office, the entire system had gone dark. Email servers offline, databases unreachable. Apex Dynamics was dead in the water. I made coffee, black, no sugar. Outside, the desert air shimmered with heat even in the early hours. My phone buzzed nonstop on the counter, first from the help desk, then from Mark, then finally from Evan. I let it ring. Again. Again. Then voicemail. I could imagine their faces. Panic layered under forced professionalism. Somewhere in that office, a group of innovators was discovering what happens when the man they called obsolete stops catching their mistakes. When Mark's name flashed again, I answered. "Morning," I said. "Harold, thank God. Everything's down. Clients can't log in. Backups are failing. We're losing data in real time. Evan says it's the legacy code, your scripts. Did you leave something behind that's interfering with the new environment?" His tone balanced between accusation and desperation. I let the question hang long enough to make him sweat. "Legacy code," I said finally. "That's what he's calling it?" "Look, I don't care about semantics," Mark snapped. "We just need it fixed. You still have local access, right?" I sipped my coffee. "No, remember? You revoked my credentials." There was a pause, a long one. Right, but you could still take a look, right? As a favor." I almost laughed. Instead, I kept my voice level. "Send me the error logs." He did. Within seconds. Panic makes people efficient. I downloaded them to my mirrored system, the copy I'd built quietly over months. Within minutes, the story unfolded line by line. Evan had modified the security layer, bypassing the dependency scripts I'd written years ago. Those scripts had been the system's spine. Without them, one small conflict cascaded into total failure. The backups he'd disabled to speed up deployment sealed their fate. The fix was simple. Restoring the original configuration would stabilize the system within an hour. But I wasn't their employee anymore. I was a consultant they'd dismissed before the transition was complete. Another call came in. Mark again. "Clients are threatening lawsuits," he said, voice cracking. "We need this fixed now, Harold. Please." "I told you," I said quietly. I returned my keys. "Be reasonable. You built this infrastructure. You can't just let it collapse." "I'm not letting it collapse," I said. "I'm just not holding it up anymore." Then I ended the call. For the rest of the morning, I watched. I watched from the mirrored dashboard as Apex bled clients. One by one, contracts were terminated. access revoked, servers timed out. The chaos built like a controlled detonation, each failure triggering the next. Evan tried rebooting from a clean state only to discover the clean state was corrupted. His own shortcut had overwritten the integrity files. Every hour they tried something new, and every hour the system sank deeper. By noon, the damage was irreversible. I started documenting everything: screenshots of system logs, timestamps, chat transcripts, emails. Every error traced back to Evan's unauthorized edits. Every executive decision that stripped oversight. Every revoked permission. All preserved in digital clarity. Evidence doesn't need emotion. It just needs to exist. Around 5. Mark texted again. "If you have any decency left, help us fix this before it's too late." I didn't reply. That night, I sat at my desk, the only light coming from the twin monitors. On one screen, the mirrored network pulsed in perfect health. On the other, Apex's official system lay flatlined, heartbeat gone. I organized the files into a single directory labeled Incident 421, then composed a new email. 2. Board of Directors. Subject: System Integrity Report. Immediate review. Required I attached everything: the logs, the communications, the chain of command showing negligence. No opinions, no anger, no commentary, just unfiltered truth. When I hit send, I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not regret, just stillness. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the faint glow of the monitors. I didn't burn the system. I simply stopped holding it together. 48 hours after the crash, I woke to a silence that felt almost ceremonial. The phone wasn't buzzing anymore. No new alerts, no emergency calls, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the desert morning pressing against the windows. I poured coffee and opened my laptop. The company's internal news feed, which I still had access to, was lighting up like a distress beacon. Apex Dynamics' biggest client, one that accounted for nearly half of their annual revenue, had officially terminated all contracts. The statement was short, clinical, and devastating. Due to sustained service outages and security concerns, Apex Dynamics has failed to meet contractual obligations. Scrolling further, I saw the ripple effect unfolding in real time. The board had issued an emergency statement, citing gross managerial negligence during transition. Underneath that, a line that made me stop and read twice. Effective immediately, CEO Mark Latham is relieved of his duties pending investigation. They didn't even give him the courtesy of a resignation. Just relieved of duties, the corporate equivalent of exile. A few posts down, someone had leaked a photo of security escorting Evan out of the building. He looked smaller somehow, his usual smirk replaced by something that almost resembled fear. His badge was clipped to his collar, his laptop sealed in a clear evidence bag. The caption read, "Employee terminated following breach investigation." I didn't need to read between the lines. The board had read the report I sent. They knew who was responsible and who wasn't. The truth had done its job. The inbox pinged once. HR. Subject line: Reinstatement opportunity. The message was polite, almost apologetic. "Dear Mr. Dunn, effective immediately, your termination is reversed. The board of directors would like to discuss the possibility of a senior consulting role to assist in rebuilding system infrastructure. We recognize your years of service and hope to re-establish a partnership moving forward." I stared at the email for a long moment, then typed 2 words: "Not interested." I read them twice before hitting send. Then, I dragged the message into the trash and emptied the folder. That was it. No grand gesture, no victory speech, just deletion. Later that afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I drove to the office for the first time since they'd told me to work from home. The parking lot was half empty. A few cars idled near the loading dock, while employees carried boxes to their trunks, monitors, plants, photos, all the sentimental debris of a collapsing company. The lobby, once a polished monument to modern tech, looked smaller, quieter. I stood outside for a while, hands in my pockets, watching them file out. Some I recognized, some I didn't. Nobody looked up. There was no triumph in it, no sense of conquest, just completion. Like watching the credits roll after a long, exhausting film you'd already seen too many times. I didn't go inside. There was nothing there for me anymore. Back home, I walked straight to the garage. The air smelled of dust and machine oil. My old equipment still lined the shelves, routers, manuals, the hardware that had outlived every person who'd ever called it, outdated. I powered up the mirrored drive one last time, confirming what I already knew. Perfect copy, untouched, clean. Every log, every timestamp, every file preserved. Then I formatted it. The progress bar crawled across the screen, erasing the last connection I had to Apex Dynamics. When it was done, I ejected the drive, fed it into the shredder, and listened to the slow grind of metal and plastic giving way. One by one, I did the same with the old discs. By the time I finished, the sun was setting through the garage window, the light cutting through the dust like gold through smoke. I stood there for a moment, hands resting on the workbench, breathing in the quiet. Sometimes, the best revenge is letting people experience the world they built without you. The machine clicked off. The air went still. System purged. Balance restored.